Welcome to episode 12 of Next Gen Convos. Today we talk about all things Homeless Youth Awareness Month, including volunteering in your local community and destigmatizing homelessness. Keep listening to hear an interview with our adult supporter Kippi on how our state is working to end youth homelessness with the Yhdp grant and host homes.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of the guests of our podcast own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Youth Homelessness Awareness Month starts in November. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what that means to each of us. So I'll kick it off. What it means to me is that you're raising any type of awareness of homelessness towards youth in your community and just telling all about it. Even when you're not working that month and you're just going out somewhere and maybe you decide to help a youth on the street and give them some food, and other people will start to look around when you give somebody $1 or this and that, and other people will be like, oh, I didn't even notice that person that needed anything. I was just in my own little world, going about my day. And now you just help somebody, and then you actually just personally raised awareness on your own. So that's what I like to do.
So other than raising awareness, do you think that could look like raising awareness for the fact that there's different forms of homelessness that the average person doesn't really think about? Like a young person who might be just not having a stable place, isn't necessarily on the street, but might be jumping from place to place.
With my experience, I don't remember what age I was. I think I was either 7 or 8 years old. And we were homeless. My mom just told us this a couple years ago. And so my brother was saying you know what was crazy? I didn't know we were just hopping from house to house. And so in my 8-year-old, 7-year-old brain, I was like, oh, we're having a sleepover, every single day. And that's how my mom kind of put it into perspective. So that's the other thing as well, dealing with that or younger age, you kind of, I guess, make it fun, which that doesn't really sound appropriate the way that I said it. But my mom kind of made it seem oh, it's just a big sleepover. It's not a big issue. But now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, she did her thing with that. I guess another thing that we can mention with National Homeless Youth Awareness Month, we really need to get out of that stipulation and that stereotype that they're all bad people and they're just up to no good and things of that sort, because 9 times out of 10, they are struggling for the life of them and they can't figure it out by themselves. They need help. So that's another thing that I feel like we should have a discussion about.
Yeah, I think it's very important not to just assume somebody is addicted to drugs or addicted to, whatever that they're doing that you actually physically see, and then you don't know the story behind it. They could be, numbing mental pain or even physical pain, or it's really cold outside. They need to stay warm. How else are they going to stay warm if they're not doing what they're doing just to survive? It's more of a survival method. And a lot of people just look over there oh, they chose to do this. They chose to become, what they are today. And it's really not. It's they had a situation that made them be like that or become like that.
I think that's really important to think about, is the kind of false stereotype that all people who are homeless are criminals. If people are committing crimes, it's because it's out of survival, which I don't know if this is the right time to discuss defunding the police, but maybe instead of NYPD having $3 billion, maybe some of that money can go to getting people housed. So,
I honestly agree with that because when it comes to that situation, it just seems like with society, we have a problem with having, what is it, like you said, with the police, they have like 3 point something $1 million. Why is that going into the police? They half of the time they don't really do anything, and everything is so hush hush. So at this point, it's like, why don't you guys put that into actual affordable housing? Why don't we have a sense of understanding that it's hard out here? It is extremely difficult. We need to minimize the 2 times the rent, 3 times the rent, which in Colorado, they dropped it down to 2 times the rent. But my thing is, I feel like we need to bring back $500 apartments. We need to bring back everything that was normal in like the 90s and the 80s and things of that sort. But it's just, we always have that push and pull and that double edged sword of, well, nobody wants to work. And they also have that, well, you're not paying me enough in order for me to work. So it's just like, I've noticed that a lot of the youth that I work with, they're working 2, 3 jobs, and even doing a side hustle, and they still can't get an apartment. And I'm just going through that struggle too right now. Like, I'm working 2 jobs right now, and I'm trying to navigate how to get an apartment and things of that sort. And I'm just like, bruh, it's a struggle. So it's just like, you gotta couch surf. You gotta do what it is that you have to do in order to get by, because society is not fair.
I was just going to kind of bring it back to the month of November being National Homeless Youth Awareness Month. So we've talked about bringing awareness, destigmatizing homelessness in terms of like service activities, either as an individual or something that your organization does year round or as part of their mission. Do you guys have advice maybe for a young person in the community who wants to help out and do something to honor the month?
In honor of the month, I would say donate. Donate your clothes. Don't go to Plato's Closet. Don't go to Goodwill or the Salvation Army. Go to your shelters. Go to your drop-ins and stuff like that. My drop-in all the time, we get donations like crazy. And I'm actually donating some things myself, as a staff member. As a Vista member, I have been, helping out, doing some like, hey, do you need this? Do you need your hair combed? Like, do you need a brush? Things of that sort, just to help them kind of level up a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to add also, like, if you don't even know where the local like resources are to help the homeless in your community, just do some research. Go on Google, type in, homeless youth shelter. Probably some stuff will come up. If not, do some other research and you'll find it. And then you can go there, ask to volunteer, ask if they need any meals to be prepped or anything like that. You might go through like a little bit of volunteer training, but that's just to make sure like both sides of the fence is safe. Like you're safe and the youth or the homeless that you're helping is like safe as well.
I think it's important to note that homelessness doesn't only mean just on the streets. It could be couch surfing at a friend's house, or, yeah, I think that's really the main one I could think of is couch surfing, or staying in like hotels or something. And that at some point, I mean, I did that for a little bit. I think it's hard for people to also think that homelessness is also outside of sleeping on the streets.
And I think that's hard, like not just for the average individual to wrap their head around, but it's also something that makes it harder to enact policies to help those people, right? Like Yhdp, for instance, isn't that something that we kind of advocated for, was changing that definition of homelessness or using a different definition?
Absolutely. What is YHDP anyway? I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, so YHDP is a really exciting opportunity that we have from HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development Federal Agency. And I always start with that as saying they always describe housing resources as urban development. And what's really important about the Youth HUD demonstration project for us is we're not urban. We're one of a small subset of grantees that are thinking of rural challenges. So the Youth HUD demonstration project started about 6 years ago, and HUD realized that there needed to be some really important learning and research done on the needs of young people who become unhoused. And up until this point, what's really important is the country follows. There's an interagency organization with all representatives from all federal agencies that are working to end homelessness at the federal level. We also have that at the state level. All our state agencies have somebody who this is their focus. But they were working on veterans. They were working on chronically homeless individuals. They've been working on families, and they hadn't seen much success with youth. And what was great is the decision was made. We got to do something for youth, but we can't do it without their advice because we have lots of resources. We have lots of strategies, and we're not seeing that there's improvement in the youth homeless. So that's what YHDP does. So it is a grant that comes in through the COC. And the COC are groups within the state of Colorado that work on issues using those HUD funding. And so this grant gives us dollars to do kind of three important things. So the first thing, which is Youth Move Colorado's role at this, first thing is to build the capacity for youth voice through the creation of a youth action board and youth leaders to guide and change how we're doing homeless youth. So that's the first thing we've done. And that's kind of really exciting because we have that. And VISTA members will be deployed across all of our regions who will be helping implement this plan locally. The second thing we had to do is write a thing called the Coordinated Community Plan. And we can make sure if listeners want to hear about that, we'll have that on our YHDP post page on Youth Move Colorado. But this plan was to look at 3 or 4 things. And I'm going to ask you guys the questions back after I explain this, but it was to look at what do we need to do to build that system to prevent and end youth homelessness. So we had to look at data. We had to look at what we call the core 4, which is housing. So we always talk about safe and stable housing, but we also need to look at well-being. We needed to look at education and employment. And lastly, we had to look at that big thing about permanency. Young people often are put in a position that they have to move to get to resources versus staying in their community with their support network. They have to go to where resources are versus being able to be where they want to be to get those resources. So we looked at all of that, and then we created action steps, and we have 7 to take and change what's happening and build that system. So over the next 2 years, we will be working on those action steps and putting those things into place because it's the balance of state with the guidance of Youth Move Colorado's best thinking about if we change these 7 things, it will make it better for young people. And then the last thing we had to do is think about how do we want to spend that $2.9 million. And there were certain projects that we got to pick. We as a state picked youth-led. So that's the stuff that will be led by Youth Move Colorado, which is both the coordinated entry system. Coordinated entry is making sure that people are able to get to resources. And most importantly, the highest need youth are put at the top of the list versus those who you're given a resource based on when you get on the list. So that's kind of what coordinated entry does. And it forces coordination on our limited resources we have. The second thing that young people will be leading through Youth Move Colorado is navigation and diversion. They will be doing that through a peer support model. So we have the youth-led project, and then we have support service models, which is outreach and diversion and host homes, which fit under that. So it's really important that Colorado and Balance of State chose host homes and kinship care as an important quality, knowing that it's better to be in a family-like setting versus an institutionalized setting. So we chose that. And then the last way we'll be spending our dollars will be for a thing called transitional living and rapid rehousing. That's new with YHDP. So every year with YHDP, what they find other states doing and innovations become ways that HUD dollars are being able to be used differently. And so we're going to be taking advantage of that. So that's kind of what YHDP does. But we are moving into implementation starting in November. And this will be the time that we'll put our plan into action. And most and more importantly, this will be the time that we'll be starting a continuous quality improvement process, which VISTAs, you guys will be helping with, which would be looking at the data, looking at what we're learning and taking thoughtful conversations and data-driven information to make those mid-course adjustments so that 2 years from now, we'll have a better system to prevent and end youth homelessness in the state of Colorado. But my question back to you guys is, it's exciting. How did it feel for you all to facilitate those meetings? And how did it feel to be working in partnership to write this plan? Because I always think you guys went in and did such an amazing job, and you were put in situations and guiding conversations. How did that feel to be the ones coming up with that?
For me, it was really, it felt empowering as well as confusing. There were times where it was fun. There was times where it was hard. There's times where it's like, I have no idea what any of this means. But now finally being able to see the process, because it's been like a year since we found out, right?
Yes.
Like 1 year. It was right when we started.
Exactly.
And I think like just being able to be a part of that process and help make a change on a high level is so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, on like just even the learning side has been really, really cool, especially then kind of being on the other side and having just helped Chelsea do that application for another grant, kind of seeing the other side of that and how something like this is developed has just been really, really amazing. Yeah, so definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. And I would say for you guys, what to me, and so I'm just going to say something here that is new information, is we got another one of those grants. So the Balanced State of Colorado was awarded the RHY, so the Runaway and Homeless Youth Prevention Demonstration Project. There's 5 of them in the United States. We are one of them, and it will bring another $1 million in. But this is going to be focusing on really thoughtfully under 21 and really under 18, ending and preventing youth homelessness. We were just heard about that award. And so we've got to write another plan. But this plan has 2 unique things. Like I said, we are going to be targeting and focusing on really that. What does it look like for youth under the age of 18? How do we prevent them even getting into systems? And a lot of times what happens, a young person gets into a system. They get into the behavioral health system. They get into the juvenile justice. They get into the child welfare. And with all those systems, you're more likely to become unhoused and be homeless more than any other population. So that's one of those drivers. And so that's going to be super excited. The other thing that we get to experiment with, which HUD does not allow, is this grant allows for a thing called cash transfers. And what cash transfers say is that oftentimes if a young person just had the money they needed, or a family had the money they needed, they would be able to do what they need to do and not become unhoused or get back stable again. University of Denver did some big research on this, and they found that out in Denver. And there's great data on that. There's national research. So we're going to be able to do cash transfers, which means a young person would be able just to come forward and say, you know what? Right now, I don't need all this therapy. Right now, I don't need this. But what I need is if I could have $2,000 to pay my back rent and get my car fixed so I could go to school, I will be okay, instead of having to do all these other things to even get some help from you all. And so we're really excited to say, will cash transfers make a difference? I believe they will. And it puts young people, what we know is in America, without assets. Like if you don't have money, you don't have assets, and assets are like a car, a cost for education, employment, maybe you have your own business, all of those things. It's very hard to find success. And we make it very hard. We make people have to jump through many, many hoops to just get those resources that are like that tipping point that helps them become stable. So that to me is a really exciting opportunity. And again, Youth Move Colorado, you all are the YAB for that program, and we'll be able to build from there. So that's kind of good news I'm announcing today.
Awesome. Can we put that in?
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, you absolutely put that in.
Sweet. So would that kind of money also go to, like, I know, isn't it really hard to get an actual youth overnight shelter? It's really hard to get that like certified, right?
Right. So, in Colorado, we have now 6 federally funded runaway and homeless youth programs. So it's CARAS in Grand Junction, It's Together in Boulder. It's Urban Peak in Denver. It's The Place in Colorado Springs. It's now Joint Initiatives in Colorado Springs. And the other federally funded runaway and homeless youth provider in the state is the Colorado Rural Collaborative, which is a big partner in all of this. And so let's talk about that. So in order to be a shelter, homeless youth shelter, you follow the children's code. So it's actually a child care center is kind of how it's licensed. And you have to be licensed and you have to follow all that. To run a brick and mortar shelter where there's beds and people are coming in is really, really costly. And more importantly, you have to have a high enough number of young people coming in order for that to be reasonable. Because, I used to be a peer reviewer for the Family Youth Service Bureau, and I would go to Ohio and I would go to Minnesota and I'd go to smaller communities and they'd build these beautiful shelters and they'd have like 5 beds and they would maybe have 4 kids a quarter. And those young people, it wasn't enough usage to really keep that building open and keep it staffed. Because imagine if you're a staff person and you're only supporting 4 youth every 3 months, right? So Colorado got this grant called the Strategic Runaway and Homeless Youth Grant. It's known as SSRHY, to look at that, because in rural communities, they just don't have the money, nor do they have the capacity to build brick and mortar shelters because of the cost. So we picked a host home model. And you're right, because even with host home models, it's very challenging and difficult to get those homes certified. When we started this, and I supported the development of the bill, it was a partnership. It was a big step for people to take, to say, oh my gosh, we're going to host home. Because think about it, for young people, a lot of times if they become unhoused, what do? They go stay with a friend of theirs. They might know somebody in the community that says, yep, you can come stay with me. And so they kind of find their own way. So the couch surfing is a way we do this. Well, host homes are a way where young people can take and identify a safe family or safe place for them to stay. And they would then get the support in the home of their choice versus going to a brick and mortar shelter somewhere versus moving to a community that has that. So when the law was written, it was written to mirror foster care. And there was this belief that we have lots of foster parents out there and lots of foster homes out there, and that a person could be both certified as a foster parent and as a host home parent. Well, fast forward to post-COVID world, in our rural communities, there are some counties that don't even have a single foster home, which is, young people need to be in their communities. Like the thought of, I don't have a safe home, I don't have a place to stay, the thought of them then having to be sent to another community is another ripple in their lives. So we are working really hard to modify that host home bill to a regulatory model. And that's what Washington State did. They did a ton of research, and they found that through partnerships with departments of education, there's a powerful way that you can rethink doing host homes in a different way. Because what happens is you have young people who are going to school because that's one of our goals. The school is checking in with them. The runaway and homeless youth provider is checking in with them. The family has gone through a background check and we know the home is safe. And the young person, most importantly, is in a place where they are comfortable with where they're staying and they know that family. And so this is kind of what we're hoping to do, because up until now, outside of Garfield County, when we did our pilot testing the new law, we have yet to certify additional host homes in the state of Colorado because of the complexity of our current law. So I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit of a long answer, but I'd love for you guys, if there are other questions about host homes and shelters and what's required, please let me know.
So just to clarify this, the idea of host homes is something that's fairly new to the state, right?
Well, the law was passed actually 11 years ago. So that's the challenge, is it's been hard to certify them. Host homes are becoming considered an innovation. There's a lot of research out there. The Rural Collaborative has been using a host home model for the past 11 years. And so it's being used, but the concept of certifying them, because the first idea when you think about host homes is that there would be a stack of families, just like we do with foster care, that would be certified to be host homes for young people who become unhoused under the age of 18. The second thing that was and that was the thing. But what we found, there were two really important things. Host families usually want to support that young person they know, or that young person knows a place where they would like to see if they could stay while they're getting stable and while they're figuring it out. And so that's the shift in our model, is it's much more youth directed. When a young person works and says, here's that place where I think I want to stay, will you help me ask? And then what happens on the back end through the Runaway and Homeless Youth dollars we have for the Rural Collaborative, or through the Division of Housing, they also at the state level have been funding host homes for about 5 years. They sit down and those resources come in to do two things: support that family and the additional costs that might be needed for that young person now to be in the home. So let's get you more money so you have resources to pay for food. Let's get you and that young person more money so that you have costs covered for, new transportation costs. There's also things like a family will come and say, we have a room, but we don't have a mattress. So let's buy the things that turn that room that young person's going to stay into a really comfortable place for their living. And so that's really, it's been around, but the old way of thinking of it is really not what young people want. It also is really hard because in certifying, most people don't want to sign up and say, I'll take any young person in my home. And most young people say, I don't want to go to any foster home. I want to go where I feel safe. I want to go with my people. I want to stay in my community. And it just changes it to be a much more youth-driven process.
It also makes so much more sense in those rural communities, because going back to talking about the overnight youth shelters that are licensed in the state, they're all in urban centers, right?
Yeah.
Almost all of them.
Yeah, they all are. And, I can tell you so we have both. The Division of Housing actually has given the Rural Collaborative a grant. So we do host homing with our grant. We've sheltered and hosted many young people, and the Division of Housing over 18, we're able to support a young person for up to 6 months in that program. We have a TLP model. We can support a young person for a year and a half in a home. And then we have an emergency shelter model, which is 21 day, which is the law. But think about it this way. We have found, a young person who's living in a very small rural community, and they're able to, here's a good example. We had a young person living in a very small rural community. There was a family that said, yes, they could stay there. Their school district was a ways away. The actual principal would drive by every day, pick that young person up, drive them to school. They would go back to that home. That home was close to that young person's church. It was close to that young person's job. So they didn't lose their permanency because they could be in a home where they would go back and forth. They also didn't lose the challenges of, I'm now unhoused and now I'm sleeping in a place, in a home with people I don't know, in a community that's far, far away from my people and what is important to me. And so that's really what we're driving for, because like you said, in rural communities, it would be many, many years ago, it would be put a young person on a bus and send them to Denver or Boulder or Colorado Springs or Grand Junction, and hopefully they could get in that shelter. And young people shouldn't have to do that. And we imagine, so this is my wish, right? We imagine, so what you're saying true is, Julia, we imagine in every town, city, and county across the state of Colorado, there is that family or that one place that will take and support a young person to keep them strong, keep them connected, and help them in this time where they're really trying their very hardest to get stable and move forward. And so that's kind of our other challenge, is we need to find those families and those places to kind of join our effort, because we can't end this problem without having partners. So maybe they're not going to be a host home, but maybe they could be a mentor. Maybe they're not going to be a host home, but they could host after-school events for young people. And it's just all certain ways that the more we create community strength and supports for young people and safe places to them to stay, it builds a more vibrant rural Colorado.
Soraya, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
What was your favorite part about being involved in all the Yhdp stuff and kind of like being a part of that youth-led part?
Honestly, it's more for me like I get to watch to see how it goes, and being part of like actually starting the project and then continuously going through with it, it's an amazing experience. Not only as a youth led, but it seems like we are having more hope with trying to get everything involved with the youth. It's for us and by us, so it's something that's really exciting. And I can't wait to see what we go forward with this.
Sounds like you're volunteering to be part of the evaluation team. And, I do think that's really amazing is build a plan and then be sitting on the evaluation side, right? And say, are these the right decisions? And if not, what do we do differently? Like, what are we going to change to make it work better? And to me, I think that's really cool. And we need not only those that are excited about doing the work and serving young people, but we need young adults who are sitting there looking at the challenges and looking at the data and saying, the reason why I think this doesn't work is because of this, and we get to change it again. So y'all aren't done yet, but I love that you said that.
Right.
I think something interesting about the youth-led component of this is I think a lot of the time young people who are involved in stuff like this, or they're maybe sitting on like a youth advisory board, at one point they're involved and they get to share their opinions, but then they're out of the process and we don't get to see what happens and it's not ours anymore. But this has felt very ours, from the beginning, and it will continue to be. So yeah, that's another cool thing. Do we want to add anything else?
So, I guess the important thing that we need to do now is there's a lot of confusion about host homes in the state of Colorado. It's important to know that there are host homes that are connected with the disability world, and there are host homes that are connected with the child welfare side or the runaway and homeless youth side. And it's important to know that those are two completely different strategies. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what that means, but we as a state have been using host homing since, we were being founded, right? People came to Colorado and they lived in what were known as boarding houses, right? So there was a family person there. They would cook a meal. They would have a shower. They would have that community. We see another model of host homing are in Boulder. They have a couple co-op houses. So their homes, there is a person who stays there, is kind of like the house parent. They have meetings as a group. They cook meals together. They do things together. So we've had that model. We also have had models in the child welfare world, and the closest thing to that is kinship. And that is also in Yhdp. It's called host home / kinship, where a young person who may be struggling with their family may be put in a kinship placement, and they're staying with kin or a family-like connection. That's what we want to do in the runaway and homeless youth world with host homes, is to really make sure that young people don't receive more trauma, don't get more displaced, and don't lose the connections that are important to them because they have to move to a more institutionalized setting, which is those big youth homeless shelters. And don't get me wrong, those are great, but they're not right for rural communities. We need to be able to have, if a young person becomes displaced in Mineral, Colorado, or San Juan County, right? These are two teeny counties in the state of Colorado. We need to be able to have an option to keep them there so they don't have to stop going to the school. They don't have to give up their job. They don't have to choose between sleeping in their car or getting the things they need. And so that's where host homes is the ideal and the right solution. And we have good models. And so, what we are doing right now with the Rural Collaborative, and it's based on the work within the Yhdp grant, is we're speaking to legislators. We're talking to the Department of Human Services. We're talking to the Department of Ed. We're talking to the Division of Housing to help shepherd forward a better understanding of what this model is, what it can be, and why we need to update our current statute so that it makes it obtainable, because we create better opportunities for young people when we have resources that mirror what's right for them versus what is easiest for us to, and this sounds really bad, to monitor and to do that. And I don't think a young person is any less safe in a home where they know the family, there are workers that are providing wraparound to them, and they're still connected to the people important to them. And that's the one thing I would say is I think that's something we need to do better with.
What's wraparound?
Yeah. So wraparound, you hear wraparound a lot. So wraparound's a big term. So we have wraparound in our state, which is called high fidelity wraparound. You guys have all looked at this. This is a more trained model. It requires training. It requires credentialing. But that is the one that you see coming out of the office, the Behavioral Health Administration. And it was really shepherded in through Colorado's System of Care grant, which was known as COAC, to really build that for very, very high needs young people and families. And then there's what's called wraparound services. And that is really kind of what a lot of agencies doing. And what they do is they bring everybody together and we wrap resources around that young person. What's important in our model, and I think you guys could chime in on that, is that wraparound is youth-centered and youth-driven. And if there's a family involved, there's equitable family voice and youth voice to make the decisions which are right. But wraparound should never be prescribed to a young person. Wraparound is them being part of the plan and them setting their goals and them guiding and saying to those partners, these are the things that will help me succeed. And the partners say, have you thought about this? And you may say yes or no, but it is, those things. I'll give you a really good example, and then I'll let you guys kind of tell your story about how you know it. One of my first wraparound cases when I was at Urban Peak, and I'll talk about it, is many, 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 many years ago. But there was a young person that wasn't going to school and a young person that was really struggling. And the team was getting together and couldn't figure out. And really what it was that this young person talked about is in the home they were at, they had just gotten a brand new puppy. And they had given the young person who was being placed in that home the responsibility or the opportunity to feed that puppy. When school started, they were leaving before it was feeding time for the puppy. And they did not want to go until that puppy had been fed because they knew what it was to be hungry. And the minute they made an arrangement and changed that structure, it was okay. And that young person went to school and was confident, but the team listened to that young person's needs. And I think that that's just like those simple things that wraparound requires those involved. And the young person is a requirement of them to say, this is what it looks like for me, or this is what will help me be successful.
A really big part of wraparound also is natural supports being involved, right?
Yep.
Which makes sense for in the context of host homes.
Yeah. Natural supports are really important. And the natural supports are driven by that young adult, right? So they know who their people are and they know who needs to be a part of it. And I won't put any of you guys on the spot, but I'd love for you guys, if you have any experiences of your, just over the last year of services, simple things that you have found that you've supported a young person with that was not this complex case plan, was not this complex service, but it was a wraparound strategy that just made the difference for that young person.
I guess I'll go. So I guess what I'm currently working on now with the youth is that I'm trying to assist them with what it is that they need kind of mentally, not in the aspect of a therapist, but, like words of affirmations, making sure that they are better in a better headspace. Like for me, I have a billboard and every day when I come into work, I put a affirmation for the day. And whenever they come in to my part of the office, I'll be like, hey, affirmation of the day. You get to repeat it 3 times. You cannot leave this room until you say all 3 of them. And then once you say all 3, you go on about your day. They usually kind of feel a little better about it, but I've been kind of working with that. So that's one thing that I've been doing to boost up their self-esteem and confidence and stuff like that. Because that's one way for them to make themselves feel better. Because if they feel better kind of internally, then it'll start showing externally.
Great.
What about you, Julia? What do you do?
I think cooking dinner together. Yeah. It was the first time living pretty independently and just doing not really a cooking lesson because I'm not the best in the kitchen either, but just kind of having someone there to learn with them and clean up after and, yeah, very simple, but.
You got nothing, huh?
I'm trying to think. I was like, I could come up with something, but then it's not being really honest.
But how about with Maya in the past? Was there a way that just with any of the young people in Maya when you were active or with Elevating Connections that you just did something with them or for them? You could just see the difference.
I let someone use my car when they really needed, like their car died and I wasn't driving it. So they asked to borrow mine and I let them. Don't do that. Don't do that for everyone. I've known this person for several years.
Yeah. Look, and I think you guys, those are really great examples. And Lizzie, that's a great example of the importance of healthy boundaries around wraparound, right? So there's things you can do, and then there's things that are just right on that edge. But in a wraparound world, what, we forget sometimes is like you said, those natural supports is sometimes it's not those complex services or those huge things that make a difference, right? Sometimes, and they do make a difference, but it's sometimes just somebody saying, hey, I care about you. I'm going to remind you that you're a good person. Look at these affirmations, or let's just share bread together. I had a teacher, one of my favorite teachers, once said to me, if you ever have a problem or a challenge, bake bread with that person. And over the course of making bread, you can change that relationship. And I love that thought whenever I think about wraparound, because it is that you're just breaking bread together, slowly getting to know each other and slowly building those things. So yeah, wraparound is really important. And I would say for host home models, wraparound is key to it. That's what in the rural communities we do, because there's not tons of programs. There's not tons of staff. There's not tons of resources that you can refer young people to. In rural communities, it is who are the people out there and what can we do together to help each other out. And so that's kind of the beauty of host homes. It's such a community-based model and such a way to make sure that young people get to be in that community that they consider their home.
Like, imagine all the things we can do now to help homeless youth or youth who are suffering from homelessness.
And I think especially with a month like this, where we're really, really focusing on youth homelessness as it relates to our service, it's really amazing that we can get involved in really high level, state level stuff like this. And then you guys are also doing this direct service on an individual level at your sites. I think that's really awesome.
Honestly, I think what makes me happy about like this job and like being part of this and like doing the individual work specifically, like yesterday I had a pretty relaxed day. I got whatever I needed to get done, but I was watching TV with the youth and I was doing one of their hair. And so it was just like, it just seemed like a little mini sleepover, we were just having a conversation. We were laughing and everything like that. And it was the aftermath for me. Like after I got done with her hair and everything like that, she literally just sat in the mirror and was just like, I haven't seen my hair done in so long. And I was just like, my heart melted because I was just like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. This to see their happy faces, to see that when I come in, they're like, right. And it's just being a friend to them, but also being like a listening ear is what I think could also help out with the community and stuff like that. And if you guys have like presentations, make one and present it, and all that other stuff. Go on your TikToks and Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that and just write your story out or anything like that. Somebody will be able to listen to it.
What does your organization do for listeners who might not know? And maybe Savannah and Lizzie can share about their organizations, because all of your organizations are slightly different, but all have really amazing missions.
So are we asking like specifically what we're doing for homeless youth awareness month, or are we just
No,
talking
just
general?
what is your, like, where are you right now? Where are you
Oh.
serving? And then maybe what if a young person in your community wanted to get involved and do direct service? What is something that they could come and do at your organization? Or what does your organization need,
Okay,
in
good.
terms of volunteers?
Okay. So, well, I am stationed in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I am at the Place Outreach. So I'm at the drop-in center. We also have a shelter, which I know nothing about, but I'm getting to start understanding what it is. But what we do at the drop-in, which I'm at, because I'll talk about that, It's basically like a little hangout spot. We have a community kitchen. So anything that's in there is kind of like free game. Just make sure that you wash your dishes and make sure that everything is clean. You can bring your pets, but you have to sign this little policy that you're going to keep with it at all times and things of that sort. We have, I think, either 5 or 4 case managers and a counselor that is right into the office next to me. And there's me being the Vista and stuff like that and being the peer support pretty much. And then, yeah, they just hang out next week, which is really exciting. We're going to have a hike and a barbecue from, I think it's at 10 or 11. So if you're in the Springs area, you should join and come to the place outreach.
Savannah, what's up with Together? Specifically Pring, because that's a really interesting model. And I think it makes a lot of difference in the community.
Yeah. So together, I work at the transitional living program. It has like individual apartments for transitional, like homeless youth coming out of the drop-in center and shelters around Boulder metro area and Denver. We get people from Denver as well to come up here and like live in their own little place. And it's really wonderful. They have wraparound services. There's a nurse that comes in every week and a haircut person that comes in every week as well. We have different groups that go on during the day and the evening. We have a D&D group right now every Thursday, and it's ran by Audrey, our like intern clinical counselor. It's pretty cool because she just lets them like be creative and make up some kind of character that they are, and they have like little adventures each week, with their D&D characters. And then we're also having like focus groups, like satisfactory focus groups to see how like we're doing as a program. The whole program has 3 things. It has a foster care house and then a drop-in center type house. And then we have 1440, which is the transitional living program. And it's super cool. We just did our sleep out event last month, and that's like to raise homeless awareness. I wish they would do it in November, but I guess it's too cold for most people in November. So we're going to think about doing like a can drive or a coat drive, or maybe a Friendsgiving type thing in the community where everybody can just get together and have a meal.
That's awesome. And I think that's something like a can drive, like a food drive. That's something that just an individual, like if they want to gather donations, that's something that you can do in your community, no matter where you are, which is awesome. And not yet, but we'll end this episode with a call to action for if you're listening to this and you're thinking, gee, I want to do something for my community. We're sharing ideas this whole episode. You can check out our website, our social media for some ideas. Lizzie, what's up with Shiloh?
So Shiloh they have an independent living program. I'll mainly speak on that because I feel like there are a lot of options while you're a part of the independent living program that helps around this. The independent living program is called Beyond the Walls, and a lot of kids who are aging out of the foster care system, as well as like up until you're 26. And they give you resources to help learn how to be on your own. There's also housing vouchers available, like the FUP voucher, which is the Family Unification Program. I actually just completed that and rolled into Section 8 as of this month. So there's different resources. Shiloh doesn't do that I'm aware of specialize a lot in like homelessness anymore. They did have a teen shelter program a few years back. It was like a teen homeless shelter. And I think that closed down recently or something like that.
I think something important to recognize is that different life circumstances make you way more likely to experience homelessness. And being in foster care is one of those things. Mental illness is one of those things. So you might think that your organization doesn't specifically deal with homelessness, but it absolutely does something to prevent it from happening in the first place, I think. So we'll end with a little shout out for our annual Homeless Youth Awareness Month art contest. So each year we invite young people in Colorado between the ages of 14 and 25 to share their ideas on how Colorado can prevent and end youth homelessness through art. So this is meant to shine a light on the experiences of homeless youth. We accept visual art, photography, poetry, music, and artists can win prize money. And then the first place visual art piece is selected as the logo for the month each year. So by the time this episode comes out, we will have reached the deadline, but you can still check out our Instagram to look at the winners and stay posted for next year. Yeah. But we will end this episode with, again, a call to action. If you're listening to this, wishing that you could do something in your community, Google is free. Check out some organizations in your area, see if they need volunteers. If they don't, set off on your own path and do a food drive in your community, go through your closet, donate some clothes, etc.
Make a meal. Actually, yep, you know what? I just thought about that. Another thing that you guys can do, I don't know if, it's kind of hard, but what you can do is kind of like meal prep things so that you can make like a bulk of food and stuff like that and then just give it out to the homeless. That's another thing that you can do. So that's another suggestion.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.